Chapter 1 whispers beneath the suns of slavery in the dust-choked winds of a forsaken world. The Force murmured. Tatooine, a planet parched by twin suns, where time did not pass it dried. Here, among the broken stones and rusted scriphips of forgotten civilizations, a child was born nameless to the stars. No celebration welcomed him. No Jedi sensed his coming, but the Force knew. He was born into bondage. Shackles, not symbols, marked his beginning. His mother Shmei bore him not with fanfare, but with silence. There was no father, no lineage, only a void. The Jedi would one day ponder this miracle. But on Tatooine, there were no miracles. Only debts, chains, and sand. The boy's name was Anakin. Even in youth, the Force clung to him like mist to water. He fixed machines that had never known repair. He raced pods faster than logic allowed. He dreamed of stars and skies far above the slave quarters of Mos Espa. But these gifts were not blessings, they were omens. For the Force gives with two hands, light and shadow, and demands much in return. The boy laughed sometimes, in fleeting bursts, when the sun set and the winds cooled. In that moment, he was only a child, yet the Force trembled when he smiled. There were whispers, deep ancient whispers, beneath the surface of his life. No one around him could hear them, not even Watto, the greedy Toydarian who owned his fate. But the Force listens across centuries, and it remembered something it once promised. Balance never comes gently. Far above, in a temple of polished stone and fading prophecy, the Jedi meditated and debated. They spoke of imbalance, of shadows returning. But they looked to stars and omens, not to slaves. The truth, as always, festered beneath their feet. Anakin, without knowing, was already walking toward destiny. One day, visitors came, strange ones, robed and reverent, with glowing blades at their sides and names heavy with meaning. Jedi, they had followed a ripple in the Force, a thread that led them to this desert graveyard of hope. One among them, Qui-Gon Jinn, saw the boy and did not see a slave. He saw a convergence. Tests were taken. Blood was drawn. The results defied reason. Anakin's midichlorian count was not merely high, it was unprecedented. Even Master Yoda's own blood paled beside it. Qui-Gon whispered a word then, one that had not been spoken aloud in an age chosen. But prophecy is a dangerous thread to follow. It binds, it strangles, and it lies. Shmi, mother of pain and hope, looked upon her son with eyes full of silent mourning. She knew, in that way mothers know, that she would not see him again. She did not beg, she did not ask. She only said, "He was meant to help you. He was meant to help them all." So Anakin left, not as a free soul, but as one bound by deeper chains of fate, of expectation, of cosmic design. The Jedi took him from the sands, but they could not remove the sand from within him. As the ship rose toward the stars, the boy looked down. Tatooine grew small beneath him, but something ancient had already taken root. He missed his mother. He held fear in his heart, and the Force heard it. Fear is a seed, and from it many horrors grow. In the black between worlds, Anakin looked forward with wide, wondering eyes. He believed in heroes. He believed in the Jedi. He believed in a galaxy that might love him for what he was. But the galaxy is cruel to dreamers. In the hidden places of the Force, old spirits stirred. Sith ghosts, long banished, felt the boy's pulse in the current. Darth Bane, Darth Nihilus, Darth Revan. All of them had reached for the dark in their time, and all had failed to grasp eternity. But this child, this anomaly born of nothing, was different. The Sith did not yet know his name, but they would. And the Force, vast and indifferent, waited. For prophecy had been spoken long ago, of one who would bring balance. But balance, in the mouth of the Force, is not peace. It is reckoning, and reckoning had just taken its first breath. Chapter 2. The Phantom Masters of the Order. The boy arrived at the Jedi temple, like a spark delivered into a vault of dry scrolls. Coruscant glowed beneath him-cold towers of light veiled in illusion. But the temple rose higher still, serene and unmoving, as if untouched by time or consequence. Its marble corridors whispered of legacy, of trials past, of masters who mistook silence for wisdom. Within these hallowed halls, the Force was shaped, not heard, molded, not questioned. Here the old truths ruled. Anakin Skywalker entered not as a student, but as a disturbance. The council gathered, 12 masters of law and caution. They looked upon the boy and did not see what Qui-Gon Jinn saw. They saw too much. Too old, too attached, too afraid. Yoda, smallest yet deepest, peered into Anakin's soul and found turbulence. Flickers of futures, branching like cracks in glass. Clouded, this boy's future is, he murmured. But no voice answered him. Qui-Gon stood alone. He spoke of the prophecy of the one who would bring balance, the chosen one. But his voice, though firm, echoed hollow in that room of relics. Mace Windu's eyes narrowed. You refer to the prophecy, yet you risk the present. The boy is dangerous. The judgment was passed not as a decree, but as an omission. They would not train him, but the Force disagreed. It is a strange thing to carry the weight of destiny, and be told you do not belong. Anakin stood at the edge of those towering chambers, his hands clenched, his heart hollowed. He heard everything. He remembered everything. They feared him not for what he was, but for what he might become. And fear is a mirror. In it, he saw himself, as they did, a threat. But fate, ever the silent saboteur, intervened. Darth Maul struck down Qui-Gon on the burning fields of Naboo. The master who believed in him died with a blade through his chest. Obi-Wan Kenobi young and grieving took his place. Not out of readiness, out of promise. He made a vow on the body of his fallen master. I will train the boy, so it was decided. Anakin Skywalker was made a Padawan of the Jedi Order, but his training was not like the others. He did not enter as a child. He entered as a question, a blade sheathed in prophecy. Whispers followed him through the halls. Some praised his skill, others feared his mind. Even among the younglings there was distance. He was never of them. He was always around them. The Jedi taught him serenity, but his soul burned. They preached detachment, but his heart ached. They demanded patience, but his dreams came in storms. And above all always, the prophecy loomed. The chosen one, the one who would destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. But balance is a word spoken differently by every tongue, and the Jedi did not ask what it meant. They only hoped it meant victory. That was their flaw. Hope without understanding, order without reflection. And as Anakin grew, the cracks widened in the still hours of the temple. He would stare out across Coruscant's lights, feeling the cold hum of machinery and warships beyond the clouds. He longed for Tatooine's sand, for his mother, for freedom, not from others, but from expectation. Obi-Wan did what he could. He was steady, loyal, disciplined. But he was not Qui-Gon. He was not enough, and Anakin knew it. They fought often over duty, over choices, over pride. Yet beneath their arguments was something stranger than brotherhood. A tether, love and resentment braided into one. The council watched from their pedestals. They observed, they commented, they measured, but they never understood. Anakin was not merely strong in the Force. He was the Force, incarnate, raw and unrefined. To bind him within Jedi doctrine was like capturing wildfire in a scroll. Yoda, watching from his chamber, often sighed, "He carries great darkness." He whispered once, but none dared listen closely, because to question Anakin was to question the prophecy, and to question the prophecy was to unravel the entire illusion upon which they had built their sanctuary. The Jedi were haunted by their own light, and in the shadows beyond the temple, another presence watched, always watching. Palpatine, Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, wrapped in robes of dignity and poison. He smiled at the boy. He whispered encouragement when the masters offered only rebuke. "They fear your power, Anakin," he said one day. "But I see your greatness. You are the future." And in those words, Anakin found the warmth the temple denied. It was subtle, slow, sacred in its deception. Palpatine did not rush the transformation. He nurtured it, watered it like a careful gardener of rot, for he too knew the prophecy, and he intended not to stop it, but to own it. In the night, Anakin would wake from dreams, flames, death, faces he did not know, his own hands red with blood, and sometimes Padma, always her, dying, fading. His screams echoed silently in the Force, but no one came. The Jedi did not ask about his dreams. The Jedi did not ask about his fears. They only told him to let go, and the Force, that great and terrible current that binds all things, said nothing. It watched, for the boy was learning not only the forms of lightsaber combat, not only the histories and codes, he was learning isolation. He was learning resentment. He was learning that power may be the only answer to powerlessness. And so the prophecy moved forward, not as salvation, but as warning. Chapter 3, Shadows in the Shape of a Crownder. Galaxy began to crack. From within the Senate's marble walls, from the outer rim's dust-choked borders, from whispers behind every throne, war stirred. But it did not begin with fire. It began with masks. A crisis bloomed on Naboo, and with it, a storm. The Trade Federation moved like a puppet, but whose hands pulled the strings. The Jedi believed they served peace, but even they could feel the air growing heavier, the threads of the Force tangling in secret. And in that silence, the Sith returned. Darth Sidious, cloaked in patience, crowned by lies. He had no need for Army Zet, no need for open conquest. He ruled with suggestion, with fear disguised as safety. And while the Republic's politicians bickered and bargained, he shaped the future from shadows. One mask wore the name Palpatine. One voice whispered into the ear of a queen, into the hearts of senators, into the growing doubts of Jedi. The Republic, so proud of its longevity, rotted from within, and no one saw the roots of it, not fully. Not yet. Anakin grew older, taller, stronger, more skilled, but not more at peace. He fought well, too well. In simulation and sparring, his victories came with fire behind the eyes. His opponents saw a boy, but felt something colder and echo of what he would become. Obi-Wan guided him still, but their friction deepened. Anakin chafed against control. He wanted to act, not wait. To do, not deliberate. He believed in justice, but he believed more in himself. The Jedi gave him missions. He fulfilled them with brilliance, but with every success, the chasm widened. He was already being watched. Palpatine, now Chancellor, had grown close to him. Always gentle, always subtle. "You are gifted, Anakin," he would say, "but held back by those too frightened to let you rise." And Anakin, already aching to be seen, listened. The Clone Wars erupted not with fanfare, but with a Jedi named Dooku, now a Sith named Tyrannus, revealed his allegiance. Systems seceded, planets turned. War was no longer theory, it was law, and so the Jedi became generals. They abandoned the temple for warships. They traded meditation for strategy, and Anakin, more than any, excelled in this new reality. He commanded legions of clones, living beings, bred for obedience, yet bonded to him. He led with courage, with fire, with unmatched skill, but also with vengeance. Every battle one felt personal. Every victory a step closer to reshaping the galaxy in a better image. His image. The Council praised his victories, yet never trusted his voice. They kept him close, but always at arm's length. Even as the war deepened, they denied him the rank of master. He sat on the council but without true power. A hollow seat, insult wrapped in duty. It was then that he began to doubt them fully. The cracks in his faith deepened when Padam, still hidden from the galaxy, revealed she was with child. Anakin's joy was tempered by dread, for, in the nights, the dreams returned visions of her dying, breathless in childbirth. The Force showed him loss, again and again, and he could not lose her, not her. Fear, his first companion, returned in full, and it fed on love. Palpatine watched closely, like a serpent beside a burning cradle. He whispered softly, "There is a way to save her. The Jedi would never teach you this. But the dark side holds powers many would call unnatural." Anakin did not answer, not with words, but his heart bent. For what is love when it breeds fear? And what is fear when it becomes willing to kill? On the battlefield, Anakin's strength grew terrible. He won with ruthless precision, but his enemies began to whisper. "He fights like a Sith," some said. "He does not spare." Entire outposts fell to him. Entire legions obeyed without hesitation. His men called him the hero with no fear. But fear was all he knew. The mask had begun to form, not of metal, not yet, but of silence, of isolation. He spoke less to Obi-Wan, he concealed more. Even Padam, glowing with the life within her, saw the change. He looked past her sometimes, through her, as if listening to something she could not hear. The crown of the Jedi once promised, now twisted into a noose. He could not belong to them. He could not trust them. He could not lose her. These truths circled in his mind like carrion birds feeding on his thoughts. Palpatine did not push. He did not command. He offered, and Anakin, piece by piece, began to believe. The war escalated. The galaxy bled, and in the shadows of the Senate chamber, two Sith prepared their final move. One was cloaked in robes of power. The other wore a braid and a title. He no longer trusted the shape of the crown had changed, and soon it would fall. Chapter: For the fire that clings to love, when buried, does not die. It twists, it burns, it becomes prophecies, kindling. Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Knight and secret husband, walked in two worlds, one of duty, one of devotion. To the Order, he was a symbol. To Padme, he was a man. But even that was not simple anymore. The Clone Wars had reshaped him. Each battle left behind ash that no meditation could cleanse. And yet, in Padme's arms, the mask softened. For a time, she too had changed. A senator, a rebel in thought, a believer in peace in a galaxy that had forgotten the word. When she whispered to him, "Come home safe," he did not hear politics. He heard salvation. In her presence, he remembered who he had been, a slave child. A dreaming boy, a promise. But the dreams had changed. Now, they came like poison. He saw her, always her, gasping for air, clawing at life, dying in childbirth. Each night the image grew sharper. The Force, ever cruel in its visions, showed only the end. Not the how, not the why, just death. And Anakin, who once had no power, now wielded the might of 1,000 men, yet could not stop what he saw. Not with lightsabers, not with armies. The fear returned. Not from darkness outside, but from a silence inside the Force. It would not answer. It would not tell him how to stop it, but someone else would pay Palpatine, always near, always knowing. His words, once comforting, now came like riddles carved into stone. There are pathways many fear to tread, unnatural abilities that the Jedi do not speak of. They fear the dark side, not because it corrupts, but because it frees. And Anakin, haunted by prophecy and love, listened more than he should. The Jedi noticed the change, but said little. They felt his unrest, but dared not confront it. Even Obi-Wan, bound by love and loyalty, hesitated. Instead, the Council gave Anakin a task not of battle, but of betrayal. "Spy on the Chancellor," Mace Windu ordered. "We fear he is not what he seems." The words were spoken with caution, but they landed like daggers. Anakin froze, his trust split. The Order, once his sanctuary, now asked him to violate the only man who offered him true faith. The man who said, "You are destined for greatness." The man who offered salvation. Anakin returned to Padme, shaken. He spoke in fragments, his voice thin. "They want me to watch him. They don't trust him." Padme's eyes, wide and full of worry, searched his face. "Do you?" He did not answer, because he didn't know, or worse, because he did. Padme pressed his hand to her belly. "You don't have to carry this alone." But he already was. And in silence, he broke a little more. That night, the Force screamed in him, not with words, but with pressure, a drowning sensation, rising from within. The future was suffocating him. All paths led to loss, and he would not lose. He couldn't lose her. If the Jedi refused to help, then the Jedi were in his way. Palpatine moved quickly. He revealed himself with elegance, like a blade from velvet. "I am the Sith Lord they fear." Not shouted, not threatened, whispered, and Anakin did not ignite his blade, because the words, though monstrous, made sense. Every lie he had suspected, every corruption he had felt. Palpatine did not create the war, he orchestrated it. A Sith in plain sight. And yet, in that moment, Anakin saw not a monster, but a means. "You know how to save her," Anakin whispered, trembling. Palpatine's smile never wavered. "Only through me can you achieve a power great enough to cheat death." And so the fall began, not with fury, not with blood, with silence. Anakin turned his back and walked away, but he did not strike. He fled to the Jedi Temple, seeking guidance, seeking justice. Mace Windu gathered his best and prepared to confront the Chancellor. Stay here, he told Anakin. If what you say is true, you will have earned our trust. But trust was already gone. Anakin waited, but the waiting became agony. The images of Padme's death returned, stronger now, more vivid, more final. He could not sit still. He could not be passive. Not again. Not this time. He left the temple. He made his choice. In the Chancellor's office, Mace Windu stood victorious. Sidious knelt, lightning crackling, mask removed. He must stand trial, Windu cried. He's too dangerous to live. The line between Jedi and executioner blurred, and Anakin struck. In a single motion, he severed the future. Mace fell. To the void, Palpatine rose, reborn, and the light recoiled. I will do whatever you ask, Anakin said. His voice was hollow. His name fell from grace. Sidious placed a hand on his brow. Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader. The fire had clung to love. Now it would consume. Chapter 5. The claws of the Clone War. The war did not pause. For prophecy, the galaxy burned, unaware that its fate had already been sealed in the shadows. Anakin Skywalker was gone, and Darth Vader had been born not in armor, not yet, but in oath, an oath sworn in terror, in desperation, in love corrupted by fear. The Clone Wars surged on, blind to the shift in the current. Planets fell, cities crumbled, and clones obeyed. They obeyed because obedience was all they had been bred to know. But their loyalty, once to the Jedi, now bent towards something unseen. Something approaching. Sidious watched the tides from his black throne, a phantom seated behind the mask of peace. His plan neared its end. But first, the Order had to fall not through invasion, but through betrayal. Darth Vader, cloaked in the name Anakin for the last time, was given a task. Go to the Jedi Temple, Sidious whispered, and do what must be done. And he went, no hesitation, no turning back. The temple stood tall on Coruscant, proud and gleaming, bathed in the false light of Republic loyalty. Within its ancient walls, children trained, masters meditated, and truth was still believed to be sacred. When Anakin arrived, the clone battalion followed close behind. The 500 first men who had laughed with him, bled for him, trusted him. None questioned his orders. None saw the storm behind his eyes. The gates opened, and the slaughter began. No war cry, no battle hymn, only the sound of lightsabers igniting. And ending, he moved through the temple like a wraith, efficient, merciless. He struck down masters and knights, acolytes and students. Even the younglings, hiding in the council chamber, whispered his name with trembling lips. Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? His blade answered. Outside, Coruscant carried on. Speeders flew, senators debated. But in the temple, a sacred age came to a silent, blood-soaked end. The Jedi were not warriors by design. They were keepers of balance, seekers of harmony. But the war had twisted them, and in their moment of greatest vulnerability, the darkness struck with a face they once trusted. Anakin did not weep. His eyes were cold. He believed he was saving Padme. He believed the Jedi had betrayed peace, that their death was not cruelty, but necessary. Sidious fed that lie with every breath, and on worlds far from Coruscant, the same betrayal echoed. Order 66, a simple command, uttered like scripture. Execute Order 66. The clones turned on their Jedi commanders. In a heartbeat, trust shattered. On Kashyyyk, Master Yoda felt the shift like a blade through his soul. On Felucia, Alla Secura fell without drawing her weapon. On Magito Kiadamundi ran toward his men and was gunned down mid-step. Across the stars, Jedi died, not as warriors, but as ghosts. Only a handful survived, scattered and hunted. Yoda vanished into exile. Obi-Wan left for dead on Utapau, crawled from fire and betrayal, and still the war raged. The public did not see the treachery. They saw the end of a rebellion, the rise of peace. Chancellor Palpatine addressed the Senate. With practiced grief, the attempt on my life has left me scarred and deformed. But I assure you, my resolve has never been stronger. And then he named the Jedi traitors, and then he crowned himself. The Republic died with thunderous applause. The Galactic Empire was born, and Anakin Skywalker was not there to see it, because he had gone to Mustafar. The last remnants of the Separatist Council had gathered there. In their black fortress, beside rivers of lava, they had been promised protection. They were fools. Darth Vader entered their chamber. They welcomed him with nervous smiles, and he ended them. Every last one, no honor, no mercy, only silence. It was not battle, it was ritual. The birth of the Sith's new enforcer, baptized in fire. And yet, within him, something still screamed. Padme felt it from afar. She knew something had shattered. She flew to Mustafar against reason, against hope. She brought Obi-Wan with her, though he remained hidden. When she landed, she saw him standing above the lava flows, black cloak, sunken eyes, a face she no longer recognized. But she tried, she begged, she wept. Come back, you're breaking my heart. He did not hear her. He heard only betrayal. His mind, poisoned by Sidious, believed she had brought Obi-Wan to kill him. The prophecy had twisted. He choked her with his hand. With the Force, she fell, unconscious, breathless. And then Obi-Wan emerged, and destiny split in two. Chapter 6. The Masks of Palpatine, in the heart of war and fire. One man wore two faces. Palpatine, the name was still spoken in reverence, even as its meaning curdled. He was the Supreme Chancellor, architect of peace, savior of the Republic. To the fearful, he was security. To the faithful, a symbol. To the Jedi, once a friend. But beneath the mask, Sidious, Dark Lord of the Sith, final heir to a lineage of shadows stretching from Bane to Maul to Plagueis, whose secrets now lived in him alone. He had played the long game, and he had won, not through armies, not through strength of arms, but through whispers, through war, through need. For the Jedi had needed a war to prove their relevance. The Senate needed an enemy to blame, and Anakin needed hope. That was the key. Palpatine had watched the boy grow from afar, and then beside him. He saw the cracks in the Order long before they did. Their rigid code, their self-righteous blindness, their refusal to adapt. They were already dying. The war merely gave them a grave dot, and so he offered Anakin the one thing the Jedi would never dare give: control, not through service, not through obedience, but through will. You have great power, Sidious had whispered, but power unshaped is chaos. Let me show you how to use it, how to save her. That was the final mask. Salvation, Padme's life, offered like a crown. Sidious knew the truth. He had no power over death. Plagueis might have once touched that domain, but Palpatine had killed him before he could learn it all. Still, the promise was enough, and in desperation, Anakin had submitted. Now Vader, now slave. The irony was complete. The boy who was born into chains had found them again. Forged from lies and love, Palpatine watched from the shadows as Vader cut through the galaxy like a storm. He admired his creation. A Jedi turned destroyer, a chosen one made executioner. The prophecy, long feared by the Sith, had not been defeated. It had been opted. Balance would not come through peace. Balance would come through fire. The Jedi were gone. The Senate, now an echo, cheered for the Empire. The public, weary of conflict, accepted safety in exchange for silence. And Sidious, scarred and cloaked, stood triumphant, his true face now public. No more masks needed. The galaxy no longer required illusion. But power, once tasted, is never sated. He ordered temples burned, archives purged, the Force itself rewritten. Only two truths were to remain. The Jedi betrayed the Republic. The Sith saved it in secret chambers. He studied ancient rituals, artifacts unearthed by inquisitors, forbidden texts brought from Moraband and Malachor. He sought more than empire. He sought eternity. But even Sidious, in his supremacy, could feel it. The Force shifted. Something resisted. Not rebellion, not armies, but an echo. A son, Luke Skywalker, was not yet known. But the tremor had already begun. A child born in secret, hidden from the eyes of the Sith, raised not in temples or palaces, but in silence. A spark waiting to ignite. And somewhere in the depths of Sidious's meditations, he saw it, faint, like a shadow barely formed. The son of Skywalker would undo him. He told no one, not Vader, not his spies. He hid that fear behind newer masks' ambition, confidence, laughter, but he began to act more cautiously. He doubled the Inquisitorius. He hunted every remaining Jedi with renewed fury, and he watched Vader carefully. For though Vader had proven loyal, Sidious knew the truth of the Sith. There are always two, and only one survives. The apprentice is always a danger. One day, Vader might become more than a blade. He might remember Palpatine's throne room was built like a tomb, cold, vast, surrounded by silence and the void. There he would sit for hours, listening, watching the stars turn. The galaxy now, his, yet still he feared what he could not see, for the masks of power, once worn, are not easily removed, and even the Emperor of the galaxy still wore the mask of fear. Chapter 7. The night the Jedi fell silent there was no monument, no mourning, no graves, only silence. The Jedi Order had stood for 1,000 generations, its roots deeper than empires, its teachings older than stars. And in one night it was undone, not in battle, not in war, but by betrayal, by trust broken, by clones whose eyes once looked to Jedi with loyalty, now glazed over by a single command. Order 66. That number became a curse. The Force itself recoiled. The great current, once flowing in harmony, screamed in agony. Worlds where Jedi had meditated now became tombs. Daggers from within pierced each sanctuary. Betrayal lit across the galaxy like wildfire across dry fields. In hidden places, few survived. Yoda-ancient, wise, burden felt each death like thunder in his chest. He had fought across centuries, seen the rise and fall of Sith lords, the unraveling of kingdoms, but he had never felt this erasure. He escaped, not in cowardice, in grief. He left with the last words of the dead clinging to him like dust. The guilt would never leave. Not because he had failed to stop it, but because he had not seen it coming, and Obi-Wan, left to rot on the sinkholes of Utapau, survived only by chance. And by instinct, the betrayal wounded him more deeply than any blade. To return to Coruscant, to the temple, to the stone halls where children once laughed was, to step into a mass grave, he walked through it. He saw what Anakin had done, Younglings, knights, masters, all fallen at the hands of the one they had called chosen. The holo recordings told the truth in flickers of light and shadow. Anakin Skywalker, cloaked in darkness, leading the clones, striking down hope. It broke him, and yet he could not scream. There was no time, because Padmé was missing, and the truth. Connection to Anakin was the final thread in this shattered tapestry. Obi-Wan confronted her, not with anger, with pleading. Where is he? Padmé tried to lie. But love does not hide grief well. He's gone, she whispered. She had felt the darkness rising in her beloved long before it showed its face. In his eyes, in his voice, in the way he gripped her hand tighter, spoke of power, of fear, of saving her. She thought she could anchor him. She was wrong, so she went to Mustafar, pregnant with twins, burdened with hope, and dragging behind her a final question: can love pull him back? Obi-Wan stowed aboard, not as Jedi, but as witness. And while they traveled, the Force itself fell into mourning. No temple resonated with harmony. No crystal sang. The light side, fractured. The dark side, triumphant. Sidious stood in the Senate with triumph etched across his ruined face. He spoke, not of conquest, but of transition. The Jedi, he claimed, had plotted against the Republic. Their extinction was mercy. Their death, justice, and the Senate afraid, weary. Eager for structure, Dash cheered. Democracy collapsed, not in battle, but in comfort with their blessing. The Republic was no more. The Galactic Empire had risen, and so history was rewritten. The Jedi were no longer defenders. They were villains in children's holybooks. Their archives sealed, their names erased, their lightsabers melted down for starships and walls, and those who remained, hunted by inquisitors, by clones, by Vader. He became their shadow, the hunter of his own kind. The irony was cruel and perfect. He, who once pleaded for the rank of master, now extinguished masters by the dozen. He, who once swore to protect, now enforced silence. But even Vader, in his cloaked brutality, felt the echo of what he had done. Not in the killing, but in Padmé. He could not find her. The dreams had not faded. The vision of her death still haunted him every hour, every breath. He had done all of it for her. And now he was alone, until the shuttle landed, until she stood before him, fragile, radiant, carrying life, and then, behind her, Obi-Wan. And then, everything shattered. Chapter 8, the jewel that broke the stars. The flames of Mustafar burned with a fury ancient and unnatural. Lava rivers flowed like blood through open wounds in the earth, and the sky trembled with smoke. This was no place of life. It was a crucible, a furnace where the future would be forged. Anakin stood at its heart, cloaked in black, the last whispers of the man he once was fading into ash. His face bore the rage of betrayal, not from Sidious, nor from the war, but from her, from the one he loved, from the one he thought he had saved. Padmé stood before him, her eyes wet with tears, her voice hollow. You're going down a path I can't follow. But Anakin, no. Vader now heard only accusation. You turned her against me. He hissed, even as the ache in his chest grew unbearable. The fear he had tried to extinguish had returned. Padme's gaze full of sadness, not anger, was unbearable. And then Obi-Wan stepped from her ship. He did not come with lightsaber drawn. He came with sorrow. Let her go, Anakin. That name, Anakin, was a blade sharper than any saber. You will not take her from me. The Force trembled. It did not scream it. Watched. Because this was not just a battle between friends. It was the fulfillment of a warning. A prophecy unraveling. Obi-Wan ignited his blade, reluctantly. Slowly, Vader answered with rage. Their sabers clashed with the fury of gods, their footsteps carving across steel bridges and volcanic cliffs. They fought as equals, master and brother, student and betrayer, two halves of a bond now shattered. The air burned with each strike, the lava hissed with each breath, and above them the Force held its breath. You were the chosen one. Obi-Wan cried amid the roar of fire and metal. It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them. I see through the lies of the Jedi, Vader spat back, his blade crashing with brutal weight. I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire. But these were not victories, they were justifications, and lies do not last long under fire. Their battle moved across platforms, up spires, down crumbling pathways. Like dancers of death, they spun in perfect synchronicity, matched not just in skill, but in heartbreak, because beneath the fury there was grief. Obi-Wan did not want to kill him. Vader did not want to be saved. Each strike said what words never could. I loved you. I trusted you. I tried. The duel reached its end, not with triumph, but with elevation. On the black banks of a lava river, Obi-Wan leaped to the high ground. It's over, Anakin, he said softly. Don't try it. Vader, blinded by pride, blinded by prophecy, blinded by fear, did not listen. He jumped, and Obi-Wan struck. The blade found legs. The fall found flame, and the man who was Skywalker screamed, not in anger, in agony. His body caught fire. The black cloak curled into ash, and the eyes that once looked to twin suns now burned with hatred and pain. Obi-Wan could not watch. He turned away not as victor, but as mourner. He took Anakin's lightsaber, whispered a final word. You were my brother. And then he left. Padme was dying. The darkness had touched her too deeply. Her heart, though unmarked, had broken. Her body still carried the light winds, hidden in the womb, but her soul had let go. In her final breath, she whispered, "There's still good in him." Obi-Wan fled with her, fled with the children, fled with what was left of hope. And Sidious arrived too late. He found Vader, broken, burned, crawling. He did not weep, he did not flinch. He summoned the dark side and preserved what remained: metal for limbs, armor for flesh, a mask to silence what was left of humanity. Thus was born Darth Vader, not the man, the machine. The breath that followed was not life. It was a prison. The stars would never burn the same again. Chapter 9. The Silence of Skywalker. There was no burial, no funeral pyre, no honored tomb for Anakin Skywalker. Did not die in ceremony. He vanished into myth, swallowed by shadow, smothered by machinery, and in his place stood Darth Vader, reborn in silence, encased in black armor, bound to life by tubes and wires. The breath mechanical monstrous became his voice. and the man within faded. The galaxy did not know. The Jedi were gone, the temple cold, the records buried, the Republic transformed. And Vader, once a name of prophecy, now stalked the corridors of a new empire as its fist. But inside the mask, beneath the cybernetics, behind the crimson lenses, was something less than a man. Not peace, not power, not emptiness. He could no longer feel the heat of sunlight, no longer taste food, no longer sleep without nightmares of Mustafar her eyes, Padme's eyes, staring at him as they closed forever. The Force, once vibrant in him, now churned cold. It was still there, but it hurt. And Sidious, his new master, his savior, his captor felt it. He kept Vader close, gave him purpose, sent him to hunt the survivors of the Jedi Purge. One by one, he tracked them through the Outer Rim mold masters, forgotten knights. Those who had hidden in caves and crumbled temples, Vader struck them down without pause. But each death echoed. Each one was another fragment of the past shattered. A mirror cracking, a face unrecognized. He walked among the ruins of the order he once worshipped. He ignited his red blade where he had once bowed his head in reverence. He saw younglings' drawings burned into walls. Names he once knew, now chiseled into tombs. And he said nothing, for the Sith do not grieve. Not outwardly, he stood in silence as the Jedi were erased from every system, their statues pulled down, their teachings outlawed. But beneath his armor, the silence was not discipline, it was mourning. Even the clones, once his brothers in arms, began to age out, their loyalty replaced by stormtroopers, faceless, obedient, disposable. He did not speak to them, he did not see them, for Vader saw only ghosts. Podmo bi-1.yoda.qui-gon. Even himself, in the days when he believed in stars and prophecy. That boy Anakin Skywalker haunted the dark corridors of his thoughts, like an echo that would not fade. Sidious knew this. He feared this, because the Sith rule of two is not just about power, it is about inevitability. The apprentice must one day replace the master, and the master must always ensure that replacement never comes. So he kept Vader leashed, broken, wounded, reminded constantly of the pain, of what he had lost. He told him Padme had died because of his own anger, that Obi-Wan had betrayed him, that the Jedi had used him, lied to him, discarded him, and Vader believed, because to believe otherwise would be to break. So he stood, years passing like storms outside a locked room. Systems fell, rebels rose, and Vader became a myth, not a man, a wraith in black armor, a death sentence walking. And yet, in the dark, something stirred. A name, a whisper, Skywalker, Vader first. Heard it on the lips of spies, in the recordings of a skirmish. A rebel pilot, with the name Skywalker. It could have meant nothing. It could have meant everything. A crack formed, not in the armor, in the silence. He said nothing to Sidious, but within, the storm returned. Had she lived? Had the child survived? Had the Force preserved? A secret from even the Sith. He searched, discreetly. Inquisitors sent to probe, to dig. He did not say why, but he watched every mission carefully, seeking not Jedi this time, but truth. And still, the galaxy trembled. The rebellion grew. Small at first, a flame in the cold, but flames grow when fed. The more Vader crushed, the more hope bled into the stars, because the darkness was too complete, the tyranny too loud, and somewhere in that rebellion flew a boy. Luke, not yet a warrior, not yet a threat, but destined. And the Force, so long silent, began to sing again, softly, faintly, as if remembering a melody long forbidden. Vader stood alone in the halls of his Star Destroyer, his breath the only sound. He looked through glass at the galaxy he had helped conquer, and still, in the silence, one question remained. Was there still anything left? Of Skywalker. Chapter 10. The spark in the ashes. The galaxy had adapted to darkness. Tyranny was no longer new, it was expected. The Imperial March echoed through cities once free, and the people learned to live beneath the weight of silence. Hope became a fragile thing, passed like contraband, whispered in corners and written in invisible ink. But in the cracks of that silence, something stirred. A name, a boy, Luke Skywalker. He was no Jedi, not yet. A farm boy raised beneath twin suns on Tatooine, just as his father had been. But unlike Anakin, Luke had known nothing of slavery, nothing of prophecy, only the simplicity of harvests and longing gazes at distant stars. And yet the Force watched him, not with judgment, not with fate, with waiting. The spark had survived. It had passed from Padme's dying breath to Obi-Wan's trembling hands, to the sands of a forgotten world, hidden, protected, sheltered from the reach of Sidious and the gaze of Vader. But no shelter is eternal. Rebellion stirred. The Empire's grip, though vast, could not silence every voice. And into this unrest, Luke stumbled, guided by the hidden hand of destiny. He found an old man, Ben Kenobi. But he was not old, he was broken. Obi-Wan had buried his lightsaber, and with it, his past. He had watched over the boy for years, never revealing who he truly was, because the truth was unbearable. Luke was Anakin's son, the son of the fallen, the son of the one Obi-Wan could not save. But the galaxy would not wait. A message, encoded within a droid, pulled them both from hiding. The name Leia, the symbol of rebellion, the first true act of defiance. And so Obi-Wan ignited his blade again, for one last mission, one final journey, not to defeat evil but to pass on a spark. He began to teach Luke not with ceremony, but with sorrow. The Force is everywhere. The Force is everything, and the Force is still wounded. They flew into the jaws of the Empire, and with them flew destiny. For, as Vader moved through his fleets, through the steel corridors of his throne ships, he felt it, a tremor, a presence faint but familiar in the Death Star's halls. When Obi-Wan and Vader met again, it was not a duel, it was an ending. "You can't win, Darth," Obi-Wan said softly. "If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." And when Vader's blade fell, Obi-Wan vanished, not in death, in purpose. The Jedi became legend again, not in numbers, but in faith, and the boy escaped. Luke, he saw the blade fall, saw his guide vanish into air, and still he believed. He joined the rebellion. He fought not as a warrior, but as a symbol. He flew an X-wing, and with the Force barely awoken in him, he fired the shot that shattered the Death Star, a weapon of ultimate fear destroyed by the hope of a single pilot. And in that moment, Vader knew. The Force screamed the truth in his mind. Skywalker, his name, his blood, his son. Sidious had not told him. The boy was alive, the child of Pad, the echo of all he had lost. But now the echo had become a threat, not just to the Empire, But to the silence Vader had built around himself, he watched Luke from afar, through spies, through visions, through the Force itself. The Emperor, too, felt it. A new plan began to form, not of annihilation, but of seduction, if he could be turned. Sidious hissed. He would become a powerful ally. But Vader said nothing. He looked into the stars and saw something he had not seen in decades, possibility, not of conquest, not of control, but of return. Could the sun do what the Father could? Not, could the light survive within the shadow? Vader's thoughts were a maelstrom. The boy must die. The boy must be captured. The boy must live. The spark had become fire, and though the stars still burned in the Empire's name, ash was beginning to fall. Chapter 11. The Sun and the Sith. Force does not forget. Across the years, it binds blood to blood, wound to wound. And so, as the galaxy turned beneath the Empire's gaze, the destinies of two Skywalkers began to converge not through chance, but through inevitability. Father and son, Sith and Seeker, darkness and light. Luke Skywalker did not know what awaited him in the shadows. He trained with ghosts, with whispers, with fragments of an ancient order long buried. Yoda, hidden on Dagobah, spoke to him not as a master to apprentice, but as a weary soul to a flickering flame. Wars not make one great. Yoda rasped, his voice the wind in the swamp. Beware anger, beware hate. But Luke burned with urgency. His friends were in danger. The rebellion struggled, and in the distance, he felt a pull, an unseen gravity drawing him toward a truth he was not ready to bear. Vader, too, felt the pull, but his was not curiosity, it was memory. He stalked the stars not only as enforcer, but now as searcher, not for Jedi, not for rebels, but for the boy, his son, the last breath of Padam, the last untouched ember of the name, Skywalker. He sensed the boy's power before he saw it, raw, undisciplined, but familiar. He remembered his own youth of fury, the vision, the fire, and in Luke he saw not an enemy. He saw himself, Cloud. City became the meeting place not by fate, but by the dark side's design. Luke, in defiance, went to save his friends. But the trap had already been set. Vader waited. There were no armies, no war, just corridors of metal, steam and silence. Luke ignited his blade green, young, defiant. Vader answered with redentient, overwhelming, absolute. They dueled in silence, not with shouts or fury, but with purpose. Vader tested him, probed him, not just his strength, but his soul. Each strike a question. What are you made of? Will you become me? Will you resist? And Luke did resist. He fought not with hate, but with desperation. Not for conquest, but for those he loved. Still he was no match. Vader drove him back, blow after blow. The fight spilled into the underbelly of the city. Luke, battered and breathing hard, leaped, fell, climbed, ran, and still Vader followed. Relentless until the final moment came. A severed hand, a scream, a blade clattered into the abyss, and Luke hung from the edge, broken. Then Vader spoke not with cruelty, but with revelation. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. Luke's breath caught. No, he told me enough. He told me, you killed him, and then, no, I am your father. The words did not echo. They collapsed the world, every teaching, every hope, every dream made in a single breath. The boy, did not cry out in hatred. He cried out in horror. No, that's not true. That's impossible. But the Force bore witness. It was true. The spark was born of fire. The son of Skywalker had always been the child of Vader. And in that moment, Vader reached not as Sith, not as tyrant, but as father. Join me. Together, we can end this destructive conflict. We can bring order to the galaxy. It was not a lie, it was a wish. The chance to remake the galaxy, to rewrite destiny not as master and servant, but as blood united. But Luke saw something Vader did not, a future not forged in conquest, but in forgiveness, and so he let go. He fell into the abyss, into pain, into wind, into stars, but he did not fall into darkness. Vader watched the empty shaft and felt something, not triumph, not defeat, loss. The boy had chosen death over darkness, a choice Anakin had never made. And deep within the iron tomb of armor and scar, something stirred. The Sith do not mourn, but the Father did. Luke escaped, broken, yes, but now awakened. The truth had shattered him, but also strengthened him. He knew what he must do. He would not destroy Vader, he would save him, even if no one believed it possible, even if Vader himself had forgotten how to be saved. The galaxy stood at the edge of its final reckoning, and the Force, wounded for so long, held its breath once more. Chapter 12. The Throne of Shadows. There is a place in the galaxy where hope goes to die. A chamber without windows, a throne without light, a voice without mercy. It rests at the heart of the second death, star unfinished, orbiting the forest moon of Endera, weapon not yet complete, and yet already brimming with dread. And upon that throne Sidious waits, not in fear, not in haste, but in perfect patience. He has watched the rebellion grow like mold beneath his empire. He has allowed it, fed it, because he knows it will lead Luke to him. The boy is not a threat. The boy is a prize, an heir, and Sidious, crowned emperor not just by law but by will, now seeks to complete the ancient Sith cycle. One master, one apprentice, and one to be broken. Vader stands at his side, silent, motionless, obedient but not empty. There is noise now in the dark, unspoken, uneasy. The boy has awakened something, and Sidious feels it. He taunts Vader in quiet moments. I sense conflict in you, Lord Vader. Do not let it fester. Vader says nothing, but his silence speaks volumes. In the quiet of hyperspace, in the hum of meditation chambers, Vader remembers Padme's last words. There's still good in him. He has buried them for years, but now they surface because Luke did not try to kill him. He did not meet hatred with hatred. He fell rather than fall, and that choice, so small, so impossibly close, louder than any blade. Meanwhile, Luke prepares for the final path. He returns to Dagobah. Yoda, dying, confirms what he already knows. Vader is his father, but it is the ghost of Obi-Wan who reveals the deeper wound. Your father was seduced by the dark side. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. When that happened, the good man who was your father was destroyed. But Luke, steady now, refuses this. He believes there is still something left, a flicker beneath the metal, a shadow of Anakin still clinging to life. And Luke does not seek revenge, he seeks redemption. The rebellion begins its assault. Ender, shields, fleets, distraction, war. But Luke surrenders. He walks into the lion's mouth, into the claws of fate he is brought before. Vader, their eyes, though veiled by lenses and scars, lock again. Luke speaks softly. I know there is good in you. The Emperor hasn't driven it from you. Fully, Vader hesitates. A pause, but then, it is too late for me, son. He uses the word not as a trap, but as a truth. He does not lie to Luke. He believes it, yet within, something shifts. The armor feels heavier, the chains tighter. They ascend together to the Emperor's throne. Sidious greets Luke not as prisoner, but as legacy. Young Skywalker, I've been expecting you. He tempts him, provokes him, shows him the battle his friend's dying, the rebellion crumbling. He pushes Luke to rage. Take your weapon, strike me down with all of your hatred, and your journey toward the dark side will be complete. The trap is ancient. The trap is perfect. Luke resists at first, but then Vader speaks, if you will. Not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will. Leia, the sister, the last light. Luke explodes, blade ignited, fury unleashed. He strikes with power born not of hate but of fear, of love endangered, and Vader meets him, blow for blow. They fight not as strangers now, but as blood, and this duel is unlike the one on Mustafar. This one is a mirror, son versus father, hope versus despair, light versus what remains. Luke's blade drives Vader back. His fury rises not as Sith, but as protection. The danger of losing another, the fear of failure, and in his wrath, he brings Vader to his knees. He severs the mechanical hand. Wires spark, metal screams, and in that moment, Luke sees himself, his hand, mechanical his path. Perilous he could finish it. End Vader, become him. Sidious rises, laughs good. Good, now, fulfill your destiny. Take your father's place at my side. But Luke stops. He breathes. He lowers the blade, and he throws it away. You've failed, your highness. I am a Jedi like my father before me. The word father burns brighter than the stars. Sidious snarls. The game has turned. The air is not corrupted, and so the Emperor answers with fury. Lightning, dockside energy, pure and unnatural, pours from his hands into Luke's body. Luke screams. There is no defense. Sidious cackles. He is death incarnate, and Luke is dying. Father, please. And something inside Vader breaks. Not a wire, not a command, but the wall. He watches the boy writhe. He watches the monster laugh, and he remembers a mother's grave, a brother's flame, a lover's last breath, a promise broken, and then Anakin Skywalker returns, not in glory, in choice. He lifts Sidious with all his might. The lightning tears through him flesh and circuit and soul. But he does not stop. He throws the Emperor down the shaft, into oblivion, into silence. The Sith are undone. Anakin collapses. His breaths shallow. The mask cracked. The end. Near. Luke drags him away from the fire, tries to save him, tries to believe, but Anakin, free at last, knows the truth. It's too late for me, son. He asks only one thing. Let me look on you with my own eyes. Luke removes the helmet, and in the face beneath scarred, pale, fragile, there is no darkness, only a man, only a father. You were right. You were right about me, and with that, Anakin Skywalker becomes one with the Force, not as legend, but as redeemed chapter. 13. Ashes beneath the throne remained, black, silent, empty. Its master was gone-torn from reality, hurled into the abyss by the very apprentice he had chained for decades. Sidious had fallen, the Empire trembled, and in the cold core of the Death Star, the dark side itself recoiled. But evil does not vanish. It recedes, it mutates, it waits the throne. Was a wound in the galaxy a seat carved from fear and drenched in prophecy? Even without the body of its master, the echoes remained. A shadow in the metal, a whisper in the Force. Luke stood in its lightless chamber, the weight of fire behind him, the weight of loss before him. He had carried his father, Anakin, not Vader, from the furnace. He had watched him fade, not into oblivion, but into peace. No fireworks, no parade, just silence. And in that silence, the galaxy shifted. The Death Star began to die, its bones shaking, its breath stuttering. Outside, the rebellion struck like lightning, seizing hope with trembling hands. But within, Luke moved slowly. He was not running, he was saying goodbye. He brought the body to the hangar. The man beneath the armor deserved more than fire. But the galaxy, still blind to truth, would never understand. They would call him tyrant, monster, machine. They would never know the man who turned against the abyss. So Luke watched the flames rise. The pyre crackled under Ender's stars. The black armor, once a prison, once a weapon, melted into ember and smoke. No one asked who was being burned. No one saw the tears in Luke's eyes. But the Force did, and somewhere, far from stars and ceremony, a light returned to the stream of eternity. Anakin Skywalker was home. The celebration surged. Music, firelight, laughter. The Emperor was gone. The Death Star shattered. The rebellion stood victorious. But Luke did not cheer. He stood at the edge of it all, quiet, because endings are never clean, not in the Force, not in the soul. Leia approached, sensing the weight on him. She knew now about their blood, about their bond. She placed her hand in his. "You're not alone," she whispered. And he wasn't, but even in comfort, Luke felt it. A wound still bleeding in the galaxy. The dark side had not died. It had been cast down, yes, but darkness does not need thrones. It needs time. He had seen it in the throne room, in Sidious's eyes. The madness, the certainty, the belief that death was only a veil. "I am eternal," the Emperor had hissed. And now that whisper remained not in voice, but in possibility. Luke looked to the stars. They burned the same as they always had, but something beneath them had shifted. The future was no longer a path, it was a wound, wide open, because the Force was not at peace. Not yet. There were still cracks in the balance, still shadows in its flow. The Jedi were gone, but perhaps needed again. The Sith were defeated, but their poison still lingered, and the name, Skywalker, was no longer just history. It was inheritance. Luke knew what must come next. Not war, not vengeance, but restoration. The Jedi must return not as they were, but as they were meant to be, not as generals, not as politicians, but as keepers of light in a galaxy forever tempted by shadow. He would build it. He would begin again, but deep in the stars. Beyond celebration, beyond prophecy, something else awakened in laboratories, in hidden cults, in the dying embers of Sidious's secrets. Rituals began again. Ancient Sith tomes, forbidden science, whispered names, because the Sith never die easily. They bury themselves in memory. They disguise themselves as prophecy. And though one throne has burned, others wait in the dark. The galaxy was free. For now, but balance was never a gift. It was always a battle. And the Skywalker, line marked by pain, by love, by destiny, had not yet seen its final hour. Chapter 14. The Temple and the Flame Knot. All ruins lie buried. Some breathe, some whisper, some wait for footsteps that will never return. In the deep folds of forgotten worlds, the temples of the Jedi still stood, some shattered by war, others swallowed by time. Their stones bore no names. Their corridors held only ghosts. Luke Skywalker walked among them, alone. He had left the celebration behind. The medals, the cheers, the questions. Because answers do not grow in victory, they grow in silence. In solitude, in the dust of what came before, he found a temple on Edith. Cracked towers, wind-blown floors, statues eroded into nameless forms. It had once been a sanctuary. Now it was a tomb. He lit no torch. The Force guided his path. Every stone spoke of choices made, every echo hummed with battles lost and hearts broken. He sat where once masters had meditated, and let the stillness surround him. He reached inward, and the Force answered not in words, in visions. He saw Anakin not as Vader, but as the boy, the warrior, the broken man, the father. He saw himself, green saber, trembling hands, walking toward a future he did not understand, and he saw the galaxy, not at peace, but watching, waiting. The Force showed him fire temples, ignited not by blaster bolts, but by arrogance. 1,000 Jedi rising as soldiers, then falling as ghosts. And in their fall, the dark side laughed. The Jedi had forgotten humility, and so they were burned. Now it fell to Luke not to rebuild their monument, but to ignite their purpose. But he was not ready, not yet. He needed guidance, and from the ether of the Force it came. A light formed in the air before him, blue, flickering, ancient. The figure stepped forth, not with weight, but with wisdom. Yoda. Words ready. You are not, the ghost said, smiling as only the dead can. Luke bowed his head. I don't know where to begin. To begin, Yoda said, you must first end. Luke did not understand, but he listened. Others came, Obi-Wan. Then slowly, Anakin. Not in armor, not in rage, but as he was scarred, regretful, redeemed. My time is over, Anakin said. Yours has just begun. Luke asked the questions no holocron could answer. What is balance? What is destiny? Why must we always fight? And the Force offered no certainty, only vision. He saw new Jedi, not soldiers, not martyrs, but guardians. Not bound by fear of emotion, but shaped by wisdom. He saw temples, not of war, but of truth. But he also saw danger, new darkness, not Sith, but echoes of them, not in cloaks, but in ideology, control, power, fear disguised as order. The galaxy would not stay free for long. Already, whispers stirred of remnant warlords, of cults seeking to restore the old ways. Already, dark science stirred. In the shadows, cloning, resurrection, perversion of the natural dot. Luke left the temple. He took nothing but memory. He returned to the stars and began to seek. Students, not recruits. Believers. He would not rebuild the old order. He would forge something new, from pain, from knowledge, from fire. His saber would be his guide, but not as a weapon, as a torch, because darkness does not fear death, it fears light. He found 4 sensitives scattered across forgotten planets. He trained them gently, slowly, not with drills, but with silence, not with rules, but with reverence. But even then, he felt the tension. He was a Skywalker, and the galaxy had long memories. Some feared him, some worshipped him, some whispered that he would become what his father was. Luke ignored them, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. He built a new temple, not grand, not defiant, just a place of learning, of listening, and, for a time, peace held, but only in the quiet places, for in the deep stars, beneath the bones of the broken empire, a new flame was rising, one that would not wear the name Sith, but would remember. The throne was empty, but the hunger for power never was, and the Force, timeless and watching, stirred again, because even in renewal, there are always sparks waiting to fall into dry grass. Chapter 15. The blood that remains blood never vanishes. It thins, it wanders, it hides in children and silence and stars, but it does not disappear. The Skywalker name had echoed through war and prophecy. It had crowned emperors and brought them low. It had saved the galaxy and scarred it. Now it lingered. In shadows, Luke had tried to bury it, not in shame but in humility. He built no statues of himself. He wrote no proclamations. He trained his students not in legacy but in restraint. Yet even in stillness, the blood called to one in particular, Ben, a child born of Leia Organa and Han Solo, Skywalker by blood, Organa by name, Solo by spirit. From the moment of his birth, the Force clung to him, not like wind, but like gravity. He laughed as a child, unaware of the weight pressing on his destiny. But the galaxy knew, so did the dark. Luke felt it first. A flicker, an imbalance. Ben's power untamed, immense outgrew his age. The boy's dreams became vivid. Storms followed his anger. Animals calmed at his breath. The Force moved around him like water. Around a flame, Luke brought him to the temple. He did not call it a training. He called it protection. But deep within, he feared what the blood might become. Anakin's shadow was long, and though he had burned the armor, scattered the ashes, freed the soul still, the past lingered. Ben adored his uncle, listened, obeyed, but as he grew, so too did the whispers. You are special. You are destined. You are more than them. It began with dreams, then voices, then visions. The dark side is not a THUNDERCLAP. It is a seed, and somewhere beyond the edge of the known stars, the last embers of Palpatine's will still SMOLDERED, cultists, scientists, fanatics. They did not need armies, they needed one, a vessel, a legacy, a Skywalker. They reached for Ben's mind, gently, over years, dripping poison like honey, feeding his fears, inflaming his doubts. And the Force, ever watching, did not stop them, because choice is sacred, and tragedy waits in choices not yet. Made Luke saw the changes. Ben grew colder, sharper, his eyes drifted in meditation. His hand lingered too long on the saber hilt. He began asking questions, dangerous ones. Why do we fear passion? Why is attachment weakness? Why are we hiding when the galaxy still bleeds? Luke tried to answer, but answers do not undo blood. And so one night, under a fractured moon, Luke stood over his sleeping nephew. He felt the darkness in him. Like a storm behind glass, he ignited his saber, not to strike, but to see, to feel the truth. And in that instant, Ben woke. The boy saw only the blade, only betrayal in a moment that would echo across time. He struck, the temple burned, students died, some followed Ben, others were lost to flame and rubble. Luke survived, but he awoke not as a master, as a failure. Ben vanished into the stars, and from his silence a new name was born. Kylo Ren, not Sith, not Jedi, a wound, a question, a prince of ruin, the galaxy, fragile and gasping, fell into division again. The Empire reborn as the First Order, not in full strength, but in ideology. A cult of control, of legacy, of fear, and Kylo Scourge, of the Jedi, apprenticed to a phantom, became their enforcer. Luke vanished, not in death, in shame. He left the Force, left his saber, left his name, because the prophecy had not ended with Anakin. It had become Ben's, and the blood that once saved the galaxy now threatened to destroy it once more. The Force cried out. It did not speak, it grieved, because even the chosen cannot outrun the past. Chapter 16. The return of the echo time forgets the living, but it remembers the echo, long after names fade. Their resonance lingers in stone, in blood, in the Force, and though the galaxy believed Skywalker was gone, that Luke had become a relic, his name still pulsed beneath the skin of history. A whisper, a question, a promise waiting to be answered. Luke had buried himself on Octu, the cradle of the Jedi, where the first texts lay crumbling in salt and sea. Here, among cliffs and crashing waves, he sealed himself away, not to protect the galaxy, but to hide from it. The saber lay untouched, the Force silent. He drank bitter water, walked ancient paths, stared into the ocean until even his name seemed foreign, because he had failed. He had tried to restore the Jedi, and they had burned again. He had tried to protect his blood, and it had turned on him. Every shadow in his mind carried a face. Ben's, Anakin's, Yoda's. Padme thought he had not become a guardian, he had become a ghost. But the galaxy does not allow ghosts to sleep. Forever, a girl came, not of lineage, of choice. Rey, she arrived, not as a student, not as a warrior, but as a seeker carrying the saber he once threw away, calling him back to a war he had already lost. Luke refused. At first he saw her power, raw, hungry, terrifyingly familiar. He warned her, this is not going to go the way you think. But Rey was not afraid. She believed fiercely, blindly, that he was still a legend, that he could fix what was broken. But Luke no longer believed in legends, only in mistakes. He told her the truth, not the one sung by rebels, but the one soaked in ash. I was Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master, a legend, and I became a myth because I failed. But Rey would not let him vanish. She pressed, questioned, trained in spite of him, and slowly, the Force began to stir again. He reached for it reluctantly, quietly, and it answered, not with light, with balance. He sensed Ben Kylo still torn, not whole, not lost, a soul in limbo, just like his grandfather once was. Rey reached for Kylo too, but not as Jedi, not as enemy, as mirror. The Force connected them, spoke through them, not in words, but in understanding. Two halves of a fractured whole, one born from nowhere, one drowning in blood, and Luke watched. He warned Rey if she went to Kylo, She risked everything, but she went anyway, because belief is its own kind of rebellion. Luke prepared for the end. He walked alone to the ancient tree where the first Jedi texts lay. There he found another ghost. Yoda, the old master, laughed as he always had at fear, at failure, at Luke's endless need for certainty. Lost Ben Solo, you did. Lose Rey, we must not. Luke wept, but Yoda only smiled. Pass on what you have learned. Strength, mastery, but also weakness. Failure, yes, failure most of all. The tree burned, not in destruction, in freedom, because to preserve what was, the Jedi had let the galaxy fall, but to let go, to begin again, was the path forward. And so Luke rose, not to battle to become the echo. The resistance was dying. On Crate, they made their final stand, buried in salt and red dust. And as the First Order bore down, hope flickered for the last time, until Luke Skywalker appeared, but not in flesh. In projection, the Force flowed through him like never before, pure, luminous, limitless. He faced Kylo Ren without raising a blade, without casting a shadow, without hatred in his eyes. He let Ben strike, but the blade passed through air, because Luke was not there. He was legend made manifest, and the galaxy saw, children whispered of. Its soldiers paused in awe. The resistance escaped, hope survived, and on Octu, Luke sat upon the stone. Alone again, but not broken. The twin suns rose just as they had on Tatooine so long ago, and he smiled, not as warrior or failure, but as peace. He vanished into the Force, becoming not myth, becoming memory. The echo returned, and the galaxy trembled once more. Chapter 17. The final bloodline. The Force remembers its children, not by name, not by power, but by choice. And so, in the quiet aftermath of Legends Reborn, one soul remained standing between the collapse of all things and the flicker of something new. Rey, born of no known line, born into desert, into silence, into abandonment. She carried no crest, no temple, blood, no prophecy, and yet the Force surged within her, wild, unformed, and ancient. She did not seek power. She sought belonging, but the galaxy had no home for her, so it gave her a name, Palpatine, the final secret, the last deception of a Sith, too old to die and too monstrous to vanish. The dark had lingered in exile, feeding on science, ritual, and fear. Hidden on Exegol, a world not mapped, not remembered. The Emperor had returned not in spirit, but in flesh, rebuilt. Sidious had cheated death. He had passed through shadows, through vessels, through clones and cults. And in Rey, he placed his final hope, a granddaughter, a vessel of perfect lineage, a child of ultimate legacy. And now, as the stars flickered with war once more, he summoned her to take the throne he had preserved in storm and ruin. She resisted, but blood is a wound. She felt it, the power, the temptation, the same rage that haunted Ben Solo, the same emptiness that echoed in Anakin's final hours, the same loneliness that cracked Luke's heart. She carried all of it, and Ben. He had walked into darkness, searching for freedom, but he found only chains. Snoke had shattered him, Sidious had shaped him, and Kylo Ren became the vessel of their ambition, until Rey reached for him. Not in hate, in hope. She saw the boy beneath, the mask, the soul gasping for air beneath the shadow of legacy, and he benches to believe her in his final act. He turned, he destroyed the puppet master. Ren died, Ben rose, and together, Rey and Ben faced the Emperor. But Sidious was no longer mortal. He fed on their bond, two halves of one soul, united across the Force. Their light became his feast. Their hope became his weapon. He rose. Unnatural, impossible, eternal. Eternal, he called it destiny. He called it order. But Rey, trembling, broken, stood alone, and the Jedi answered, not in blade, in memory, in voice, Anakin, OBI-1.AH, Yoda, Luke. They did not rise beside her, they rose within her. 1,000 generations, flowing like fire through her hands, and with the saber of Leia and the saber of Luke. She crossed them, she faced Sidious, and she said, I am all the Jedi. The lightning came, the pain, but she did not yield. She gave all of herself, all the silence, all the sorrow, all the light, and Sidious was unmade, not by hatred, by truth. He had never been eternal. He was fear, clothed in ceremony, and fear dies when it is faced. The throne shattered, Exegol crumbled, but Rey fell, her breath gone, her body still, and Ben Solo, wounded, broken, found her in the ash. He held her, and he gave her his life. All of it, not through power, through love. His breath faded, his eyes closed, and like Anakin before him, Ben disappeared. Into the Force freed at last. Rey awoke, alone, but not empty. She returned to Tatooine, to the sands, to the moisture farm, where Skywalker began. She buried the sabers of Luke and Leia in the dunes, and when the stranger asked her name, she looked to the suns. She felt them dash, watching Anakin, Leia, Ben, Luke. I'm Rey, she said. A pause, then softly, Rey Skywalker, not by blood, by bond, by choice. The Force did not end. It began again. Chapter 18, Balance Reborn. The Force is not a weapon, it is not light, it is not dark, it is balance, a breath between opposites, a tide that rises, falls, and rises again, and in every cycle, it waits for one who will listen. Rey stood beneath the twin suns of Tatooine, the wind curling around her cloak like a whisper from the past. The sand beneath her feet bore the weight of all that had come before. The place where Anakin had dreamed of freedom. The place where Luke had stared at the horizon, longing for purpose. The place where the Skywalker name had begun and now, quietly, ended. But it was not an ending of sorrow. It was an offering, for the galaxy had not been saved by armies. It had been saved by choice, by a girl born of darkness, who chose light, by a man born to prophecy, who chose love, by a boy twisted into a mask, who chose to turn back. This was the redemption not of a bloodline, but of the Force itself. Rey walked the dunes in silence. Her hands, calloused, scarred, lowered the sabers of Leia and Luke into the sand. She did not bury them in grief, she planted them in peace. And then she breathed. The war was over. The Sith were not destroyed by blades, but by the refusal to become them. Sidious had crumbled not from power, but from the failure to understand. The one truth that had escaped him for generations. The Force belongs to no one. No order, no empire, no name, and now the balance held. But balance is not stillness, it is motion. The Jedi texts, once fragile, faded, now lived in Rey's hands. Their wisdom would not bind the future, but guide it. She would teach, yes, but not from temples of stone, from truth, from failure. The mistakes of the old Jedi would not be repeated. Their pride, their fear of attachment, their blindness to the living force. Rey would begin again not with doctrines, but with questions. She was not a master. She was a learner still. Somewhere in the galaxy, 4 sensitive children stirred. In their sleep, some dreamt of stars. Others moved stones without knowing why. The next chapter waited in them in laughter, in wonder. In fear, Rey would find them. Not to train warriors, to guide guardians. The age of chosen ones had passed. Now came the age of awakening. Leia was gone. Ben was gone. Luke, too. But they remained in the shimmer of stars, in the wind across the dunes, in the warmth of the Force. And they watched, not to rule, to bless, because the balance does not end with death. It returns a circle drawn in fire and breath. And now, as Rey walked toward her waiting ship, the desert faded behind her. The past had been honored, the pain faced, the blood redeemed. The Skywalkers had fallen and risen and passed on now. In their place stood a new name, a new hope, not born of legacy, born of understanding. As her ship rose into the sky, twin suns crowned her silhouette, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the Force was still. Not silent, not wounded, just still and watching, as always, waiting for the next whisper to rise. * The end.